Right, so next on we've got James King from Host in Scotland, who's going to talk about the market up there. Thank you.
There is nothing that sends the fear of God through a person more than doing a preparation for a 25-minute talk, and you get thrown 45 minutes right at the last minute. So thanks very much indeed for that, Curtis. I appreciate it. I will make no apologies for the fact that the next 45 minutes, 25 minutes, is going to be a shameless plug for Scotland. So hopefully all of you are, have got a coffee and are sitting comfortably. So I set up Host in Scotland. We actually had our 4th anniversary yesterday. I set it up purely because the Scottish market, when we looked at it through the organisation that actually pay my wages, Scottish Futures Trust, it was very clear that whilst we had huge aspirations around 4G, 5G, IoT, autonomous vehicles, all those sexy things, actually they don't really work unless you have the underlying infrastructure. There is no point in building a beautiful mansion if you don't put the sewerage pipe in. It's useless. So having realized that relatively early on, I kind of thought, right, okay, how can we set ourselves up to promote this better? And as I used to go around conferences with my normal name tag on, which says Scottish Futures Trust, the problem is as soon as you go to America, they think that you're the money because it's trust, and they kind of think that you're there to spend cash, which we're not. So I kind of thought it would be useful to actually change the name. Some of you will no doubt be aware of Host in Ireland. My beloved Celtic cousin, Gary Connolly, that runs that. And it's really, we set up Host in Scotland to try and mimic that as best we could. Take the best bits from that, take the best bits from what the Dutch are doing, from what the French are doing, the Germans, and try and bring it all together. Full disclosure, we know that Scotland is way behind. And we're not happy about it, but we understand it. We know the metrics. We know that the entire colo industry in Scotland is 1/60th of what Ireland has. I'm not even going to even start to compare it to Slough. So we know where we're starting from, but we have that advantage of being able to do it from the ground up and to actually try and encourage new players into Scotland to build purpose-built facilities rather than repurposing old sheds, because we're not in it for that. We want green, renewably powered data centers to come to Scotland, and we want to make it as easy as possible for people to do that. So in March this year, yeah, still 2021, isn't it? In March this year, we launched the Scottish Government who ultimately fund what we're doing, the snappily titled the Green Data Centre and Digital Connectivity for Scotland Vision and Action Plan, in effect a strategy. And that was based on 4 pillars that we've identified as we need to get these right, and we need to make it easy for people to come into Scotland to locate, to host their data. And that is around actually having a function like Host in Scotland, what I and others do, to act as a funnel for people at first point to know where to go to. I'm quite keen on building a data centre in Scotland. Who should I talk to? Well, that's us. So that's Host in Scotland, hostinscotland.com if you really want to go there. So have one actual organisation set up to funnel all these opportunities in, and then to funnel them out to the right people. Because we didn't have that in the past. We have great organisations like Scottish Development International, Scottish Enterprise that do great work, absolutely great work, but there wasn't a specific focus on data centres. And the reason for that, which again, we kind of all understand, is that from a primary economic development viewpoint, data centers are big fridges that don't employ very many people at a primary level. But you got to look beyond the primary level to the secondary and the tertiary. You guys and girls in the audience, basically, is what does it facilitate? It's not the end, it's the means to the end. So we then looked slightly wider, which is, well, why do we not have data centers in Scotland? Why has the industry not generally came here? Okay, we've got 5 million people. England Shire has 60. So we kind of get that. We kind of understand that you go to where the eyeballs are, and we know that. But actually, what else can we do? And it became pretty clear pretty early on that actually international connectivity, subsea fibre, is something that we are pretty bereft in. I'll come onto each one of these in turn, because I've realized I'm doing my presentation on the contents page. But also, if you pull a pipe up a beach, it's got to go somewhere. So we've got to have the backhaul. We've got to have that wholesale dark fibre to be able to connect to other locations within Scotland, but also to connect down here, which we clearly understand is a massive, massive market. And the final one, which actually is the most important one of all, is to utilize the renewable energy that Scotland generates. And I'll come on to that in a bit more detail as I go through this. So, in the data center development area, one of the quite early things that I was faced with trying to go around the world selling Scotland is going to events such as this and other conferences and trying to generate interest in Scotland and have people ask the question, this is great, where? Scotland's a big country, relatively speaking. Where? You know, we can't just go, make it easy for us. So, with that in mind, we commissioned an organization called TechRe, who are data center location specialists along the lines of a CBRE, a JLL, and Knight Frank, to look at Scotland from a GIS mapping perspective and start from literally the ground up. So apply heat map over heat map over heat map to identify hotspots within Scotland that actually are really, really good locations for hyperscalers, in particular hyperscalers, but this isn't solely focused on hyperscale. This is for all. This is for hyperscale, large scale, medium-sized colo, and edge. So we are completely ambivalent about who. And what that resulted in, and it's again shameless promotion of the website. It's up on the website. All of the documents that we ever do are put up on the website so that everyone can use them as they wish. It landed on 15 locations within Scotland, on a short list and another 30-odd in a long list. And these sites are, you can't have 15 unique sites, right? But these are 15 very, very strong sites that have access to renewable energy, that have access to dark fiber, that have access to eyeballs, that have everything that you would need. And some of them are lacking a little bit in one of the elements. And so this is why there's 4 prongs to this, it's not just 1 prong. And those locations, from a Scottish perspective, it's really, really important that those locations are not simply along the M8 from Edinburgh to Glasgow, the central belt. Right? That's almost too easy. And actually, it doesn't work because that's not where the renewable energy is being generated. The renewable energy is being generated elsewhere. So it's how can you get a location where you've got the renewable energy being generated, you have a private wire to go in so you don't hit transmission tariffs, and you get cheap renewable energy on tap. I've got the expansion host in Scotland. I would say that because I want it to be a success. So that is one of the key things that I'm focused on doing, and actually getting more resource, getting more opportunities like this with our friends at LINX to come and actually evangelize about Scotland. One of the really important things, and I was speaking with with one of your colleagues earlier about this, is that we actually recognize that one of the key elements to this entire story, whilst we're looking at the supply side, is, well, what's the demand side? Why would you come to Scotland? What's there? Why, as a customer, would I want to go? And that demand piece is really important. And we recognize that actually the public sector itself, which we represent, is a major driver of that demand. There are over 85 on-prem local authority and public sector data centers in Scotland. That's ridiculous. That's utterly ridiculous. Because those sites are, and I say data centers, I guess you all know what I mean. It could be just a rack in a room somewhere. But those sites, in terms of their efficiency, their PUE rating, are not good. In terms of their security, not good. In terms of their efficiency and the amount of carbon and cost that they're incurring, not good. And actually, and again, I use it a lot, there's too many chief executives sleeping too well. That ignorance is bliss kind of thing. Well, when I turned on my computer this morning, the network worked, so I'm doing a great job. That's good. It's not good. It's not good at all. And what we're wanting to do is to work collegiately, which is difficult when you're dealing with local authorities, because one might be SNP, one might be Labour, one might be, well, I was about to say one might be Tory, but it's Scotland, come on. But you know what I mean? They all have their different colours, their different flavours, and they don't like being told what to do. So it's about taking people on a journey and actually having them to understand, actually, there's 32 local authorities in Scotland. We should work together a bit more. And if we did work together and club together, we could actually get a purpose-built. We wouldn't own and build the facility, but we would facilitate an organisation to come in. We'd give them the reason to come in and to build and to be that anchor tenant, to be the Marks and Spencers in the shopping mall, so that they can turn the lights on. New and existing providers, this is really important to me. We do have some great organisations doing some great work in Scotland. Pulsant, IOMARK, Bright Solid, IFB, Data Vita. They're doing great stuff. I don't think they'd be that pleased if I suddenly, if they're small furniture stores, I don't think they'd be too chuffed if I brought in IKEA and wheeled in a Google or an AWS or a Microsoft. So it's about getting the entire ecosystem together and helping them to expand as well as to bring new players in, which is really what this is all about. And of course, it would be remiss to not put in something about supporting the IX growth. We actually used some, it was a very kind of small amount of funding, but we got some funding from Scottish Government a few years ago now, I think. Curtis, was it 3 years ago? 3 years ago, 4 years ago? God, I lost 2 years somewhere. And this was a small amount of funding, and the money was not given out to people to do things. It was to basically pay in kind to bring in organizations into the exchange, to make it easy. That's what it was all about. Because we talked to the Akamai's, the Facebooks. It wasn't about the money. They've got plenty. It was about, well, it's a bit of a pain in the ass. So actually, if we can make it easy, then they will come, and they did. So it's really about helping to do that. We do have some new wins. I'm trying to find, where's Terry? I'm not allowed to mention them, Terry, am I? No, okay. But we do have some good stuff. And it was really good to see Curtis' slide earlier. Is there anyone here from Manchester? We're coming to get you. Okay, we're coming to get you. You're next. Yeah, that sounds terrible coming from someone from Belfast. I do appreciate that. Sorry, that wasn't a threat. Anyway, so, yeah, but we are. We know where you live, and we're coming to get you. Okay. Yeah, so Subsea, as I mentioned earlier, we have nowhere near what the rest of the UK has in terms of Subsea Fibre, nowhere near. And actually what international Subsea Fibre we do have, for Far Ice and Shefa, they land in Scotland and they don't add or drop any data until they get here. So for us to use it, I'm from Edinburgh, is to go Edinburgh, London, all the way back up to Dunnet Bay, which is John O'Groats, and then out. And you wouldn't do that, would you? You'd go east and west. So actually, from a usage perspective, they aren't as helpful as they really could be and should be. Tampnet is commercially used. It goes out from Aberdeen to Stavanger, and it lands within IFB. And it is used, but we can get better. We can do with more, and we need more diversity on that as well. So we need to go west, we need to go north, we need to go east. Because we can't go south, because that's dry. So that's why we've got those things. And we need that really to be able to, again, make it easy. Attract the AWS, Googles, Azures of this world, as well as other providers do exist, to come to Scotland and to stay in Scotland and not just transit through it to go somewhere else. But we know that they're not going to come unless we have it. So it's what part of that cycle do you break to allow that to happen? So we have, again, a bit like we did with the Tech Re stuff, we've commissioned what's called desktop surveys, which is the witchcraft that is Subsea Fibre and how it works, which I don't profess to have any understanding of. But where exactly you would land in Scotland, because it becomes very clear once you start looking at these things. You look at a shoreline, you think you can go up anywhere, that's fine. Actually, it's not. It's not remotely close. So first of all, you need to connect somewhere, backhaul. But actually, there's an awful lot that lies beneath the surface of the water that, it's mind-blowing. So some of the mapping that we got into the east coast of Scotland had to go around wreckages from the Spanish Armada. You think, oh, okay, that's a wee while ago. And there's all sorts of things, and there's dolphin superhighways, which I didn't know existed. I do like the idea of dolphin superhighways, dolphins going like bullets through these unbelievably fast tides. But anyway, dolphins always look to be having a good time. Anyway, so, but that's there because we know that just being connected to the rest of the UK isn't enough. We need to go to the EU, we need to go to the EEA, we need to go to the US. Now, I'm not going to tell you guys what terrestrial trunk fiber is. I guess you know what it is. But there's been an awful lot of, again, really, really good stuff, really strong investment in Scotland in the kind of B2B and home residential connectivity. Really good. And it's difficult in Scotland because we've got 5 million people, 5.5 million people, but they're over a hell of a big geography. And so those last mile economics are really hard. But there's some really, really good stuff. The organizations that are putting those in, the Vodas, the City Fibre Holdings, those guys, GigaClear, doing a great job. But of course, they're all based on the principle of number of premises passed, and that's their business model. What we haven't had the same kind of investment in is the intercity, the motorways, that don't rely on homes passed. So looking at the Zaos of the world and guys like Level 3 and those sorts of guys. And that's what we're trying to really work on now is how do we bring those folks in? How do we do things slightly differently? There are opportunities that are open to us as a public sector that might not be as obvious as well, which is using the road network, using the fibre that's put alongside roads, using the railway network. The railway network's always been a really tricky one. Post Hatfield, there's always going to be a nervousness around people being inside the curtilage of the railway line. But there are a number of projects that are looking at using the asset that's there. There's fibre in the ground along the railway lines. It's about using it and offering that diversity that we know that data center operators need. There's no point in just putting an open-reach cable in, because if they go down, you're screwed. So in order to be able to offer the SLAs, the 5 nines SLAs that they offer, we need to be able to offer that diversity and redundancy. So we know that. The big one, renewable energy. Scotland punches way above its weight when it comes to renewable energy. Way above its weight. So I think there's a stat there, 25% of all wind energy in Europe is generated in Scotland. We're all windbags. That's how we're so good at the bagpipes. Is that there's loads and loads of wind. But we have natural resources in Scotland that are genuinely world leading. The difficulty is the way in which energy generation and energy transmission is priced, and this gets a wee bit controversial, so I won't go too deep into it, and how Ofgem deal with it. In effect, it's a huge sweeping generalization, but in effect, the further you are away from London, the more you pay by way of tariffs. So if you're generating your energy off the northwest coast of Scotland, you're pretty much as far away as you could possibly be. And so the energy generation tariffs are vast. So how do we use the renewable energy that's generated through dolphin superhighways? Because there is tidal energy up there as well as wave energy. How do we use geothermal? Would you believe there is geothermal in Scotland? How do we use solar? That's a difficult one to believe. There is sunshine in Scotland. I saw it yesterday. I got a bit worried that there was a big ball of fire that was coming towards the earth, but there was sun. It was spotted. And we have on and offshore wind, and plenty of it. So how do we use that better? And and data centers is just one bit of that. But when you look at an industry that relies so heavily on energy and is getting absolutely torn apart by, and I think sometimes quite rightly, by the media around how much carbon it generates, it's kind of a no-brainer. So what we did within that site selection work is we looked at, well, where are existing energy generation points, and where are future ones coming in? So as an example, Cockenzie, which is just south of Edinburgh, there's a site there that was originally just a fossil fuel power station, which has since been demolished. But there's going to be 2 offshore wind farms that come on shore at that point, 4 gigawatts of wind coming on just there. It's right beside the main trunk fibre network down south. The site's owned by the local authority. The site is massive. So if anyone is out there that fancies building a data center, just come and talk to me, because that is, what more do you want? It's perfect. And it's at the shore. And when we've been looking at potential subsea connectivity points, one of the obvious places to come in, if you're going to go out to Amsterdam, say, which would be the Holy Grail, of course, but to go out to Amsterdam, go from Cockenzie, be quite good. So we're trying to piece together all these little bits of the jigsaw to offer credible opportunities to data center owners, investors, providers, and end users to start applying pressure on your providers to say, well, actually, hold on. How green are you? How long are we going to have to wait for your new building to be built in Slough? And exactly how much is it costing per acre? It's pretty eye-watering stuff. And we know that we can do it better than that. We can do it cheaper than that, and we can do it greener than that. Told you it was going to be a plug. That was my 25 minutes. I've got a routine for the Edinburgh Festival I can go through if you want, but that's about me, I think. More than happy for any questions, and don't throw anything at me, please.
Any questions? Yeah.
No.
Sorry.
One there.
Yes. Political Scotland, does that have any effect on this?
Did you just say political?
Yeah, because of the varying disconnection from the rest of the UK. Does that have an effect on your ability to attract customers?
This is being live streamed, isn't it? Yeah. So
Careful.
there's 2 answers to that question. No. Politics will always get in the way. Big P and small p will always get in the way. I think that if I may use the B word rather than the R word, so I'm going to use Brexit rather than referendum. My background's corporate finance, so my background isn't tech at all. And paragraph 1, page 1, corporate finance 101 is never invest in times of uncertainty. And so anything that has a kind of shadow of uncertain times, you think, whoa, hold on. And it's difficult to get away from that there's always going to be a risk Because these things don't just happen like that overnight, you've got to put a bit of planning into it. I think that from a political perspective, we have the Scottish ministers, we actually formed a ministerial working group that owns this. Now, old me, that would have put the absolute fear of God into me. Oh, Jesus, ministers. But actually, it's actually really good because the ministers that we have that are over are really, really into it. They are, the first question that they asked was, how can we help? And we actually genuinely mean that. They know that if a big data center comes, it is not a kissing baby moment for them. It is just, it's a greater good moment rather than a necessary my political capital will go up. And they know that it's the right thing to do. And so I think that we're very fortunate in that we have a ministerial group that's behind it that's actually formed with 2 SNP and a Green. So Lorna Slater, MSP, who is co-convener, co-leader of the Greens, is also in that. And it's great because it holds our hand to the flame as well, that we actually have to report and do stuff. And it's quite good. That was the most political answer I could ever give you. You can get me a coffee and I'll tell you something different. I think this gentleman...
Right, we've got a question.
Yeah, Brandon Butterworth, BBC. How useful is that wind power? How often does it not actually blow enough?
Brandon, good question. So that is why I think from a data center perspective, it goes hand in hand with developments in battery tech. That the ability to actually have battery storage to manage and regulate the wind is helpful. I think you're never going to get, I don't think, to a point where you can solely rely on the wind, because the wind doesn't always blow, even in Scotland. So I think it is actually getting a suite of different renewables together. So for example, off the coast of Caithness, there's a tidal energy Samick Atlantis plant. Now, tidal energy is as a differential to wind, that as long as there's still the gravitational pull of the moon, we will have tides. So it is much more predictable and it's much more usable. And I think that's a great technology. I think it's about getting a suite of things that we can't simply rely on one.
Okay.
Probably not the answer to your question, is it?
Well, you didn't give me a number, but...
in terms of the 4, it's yet to come on, but it's 4 gigawatts coming on in Cockenzie. I think there's 1.2 coming on in Montrose.
Yeah, no, I meant a number of availability. But don't worry about the
Pass.
details. There'll be some graphs on
Pass.
that somewhere. And the follow-up for that is, given you can't use it as base load, how willing are they to sell it at a decent price? Because they could just sell it on the spot market and clean up against all the other dirty sources.
Yeah.
Maybe they sell to a data center cheap.
Yeah, I mean, it's again, a really good question. I think it's something that what we're trying to do is bring the energy providers to the energy consumers. And there's only so much that I can do that as an individual and as an organization for them to actually work together on. I think the key thing is the private wire element, where you don't actually hit the grid at all. And so for them to be a consumer right at the point that it actually comes on shore makes it much more economically viable than it just going onto the grid. It's nice to see you in person, by the way. I normally only see a face on the screen.
Any more questions? Okay. Right. Thank you, James.
You're very welcome.